Hello there, everyone. Welcome to Whisper Zone. I am your storyteller, and I'm here to guide you tonight. I know many of you use these videos to drift off to sleep, so before we begin, take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel. I'm always curious. Where are you watching from, and what time is it in your part of the world? Now, find your cozy spot and relax. Story 1. I never wanted to write this down, but I have to. My hands are shaking as I type these words. Maybe someone will find this report useful. Maybe it'll save their life. Or maybe they'll just think I'm crazy. Honestly, I wish I was. My name is William Harrison. Until 3 weeks ago, I was just a regular park ranger at Olympic National Park in Washington. I loved my job, loved helping lost hikers, teaching kids about nature, and walking through those beautiful old forests. 20 years I'd spent in these woods without any real trouble. Sure, we had the occasional bear problem or lost camper, but nothing that kept me up at night. That all changed on October 12th, 1977. It started with the howls. Not like normal wolf howls. I know those well enough. These were different, deeper. Almost human-like, but wrong in a way that made my skin crawl. I was doing my evening patrol near the North Ridge when I first heard them. The sun was setting early, like it always does in fall, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. I remember checking my watch, 6:47 p.m. The time is burned into my brain now. I had just radioed into Sarah, my colleague at the ranger station, to report that all looked normal. The tourists were gone for the day and the camping areas were quiet. That's when the first howl echoed through the trees. I froze. 20 years of experience told me this wasn't right. We had wolves in the park, sure, but they stayed in the deep wilderness, far from the trails. And they definitely didn't sound like this. This howl. It was like someone had taught a person to howl like a wolf, but their voice was too big, too wrong. Then another howl answered, and another. They were surrounding me. I'm not ashamed to admit that my heart started racing. The radio at my belt crackled, Sarah's voice cutting through the growing darkness. "Will, everything okay up there? Picking up some strange noises on your end?" I reached for the radio, but stopped when I heard something that made my blood run cold. Footsteps. Heavy footsteps. Not from an animal walking on 4 legs, but something walking on 2. Something big. The sun had almost set now, and the shadows between the trees were growing deeper by the second. I pulled out my flashlight, my hand trembling slightly. I've faced down angry bears and mountain lions, but something about this felt different. Wrong. Like I was suddenly prey in a forest I thought I knew better than my own backyard. Looking back now, I wish I had run. Just dropped everything and sprinted back to my truck. But I didn't. I was a park ranger, and this was my forest. Whatever was out there, I had a duty to investigate, to make sure no hikers were in danger. God, I was so stupid. I switched on my flashlight and slowly turned, in a circle, trying to spot whatever was making those footsteps. The beam cut through the darkness, lighting up trees and bushes. Nothing seemed wrong at first, but then I noticed something that made me stop breathing for a second. Paw prints in the dirt. These weren't normal wolf or dog prints. They were huge, bigger than my hand, and they didn't look quite right. Some looked like animal tracks, but others looked almost like bare human footprints, but wider, and with claw marks at the ends. I clicked my radio. "Sarah, you there?" "Reading you, Will. Everything okay?" "I'm not sure. Seeing some strange tracks up here. Maybe we should close this trail tomorrow, get someone to check it out." The radio crackled with static for a moment. Then Sarah's voice came back, but she sounded worried. "Will, your voice is shaking. What's really going on up there?" Before I could answer, I heard a branch snap behind me. It was close, maybe 30 feet away. I spun around, my flashlight beam cutting through the trees. For a split second, I caught a glimpse of something that shouldn't exist. It was tall, maybe 7 feet high, standing on 2 legs like a person, but wrong. Its body was covered in dark fur, and its face its face was like a wolf's, but bigger, with eyes that glowed yellow in my flashlight beam. Those eyes looked intelligent, human-like, and they were staring right at me. I'd like to say I did something brave or smart, but I didn't. I ran. The thing behind me let out a howl that sounded like a mix between a wolf and a person screaming. Other howls answered from different directions. They were coordinating, hunting me. My boots pounded against the dirt trail as I ran. I knew these paths like the back of my hand, every turn, every slope. But in the dark, with just my bouncing, flashlight beam to see by, everything looked different, scarier. I could hear them running through the woods on either side of me. They weren't trying to be quiet anymore. Heavy footsteps, breaking branches, deep breathing. They were hurting me, I realized. Like wolves do with deer, but wolves don't run on two legs. Wolves don't make sounds like that. My radio was still in my hand, and I could hear Sarah calling my name. But I couldn't stop to answer. I couldn't stop for anything. Because I knew deep in my gut that if these things caught me, being eaten would be the best thing I could hope for. The worst part? They weren't running at full speed. They were playing with me. Every few seconds, one would get close enough that I could hear its breathing, heavy and wet, right behind me. Then it would fall back, and another would take its place. They were having fun. I had a choice to make, and I had to make it fast. My truck was parked about a mile away, but the ranger station was closer, maybe half a mile. The station had thick walls, a heavy door, and guns. But to get there, I'd have to run through the darkest part of the forest. My legs were burning, and I could taste blood in my mouth from breathing so hard. One of the creatures let out another howl, closer this time, much closer. I made my decision, and turned left, jumping off the main trail onto a smaller path that led to the station. That's when I tripped. It wasn't a root or a rock. Something had grabbed my ankle. I hit the ground hard, my flashlight flying from my hand. It landed a few feet away, the beam pointing into the trees. In that light, I saw them clearly for the first time. There were 5 of them. The smallest was about my height, and the biggest was tall enough that it had to duck under the lower tree branches. They all walked on 2 legs, their bodies covered in thick, dark fur. Their hands, if you could call them that, had long fingers ending in claws that looked sharp enough to tear through metal, but it was their faces that made me forget how to breathe. They looked like wolves, but bigger, meaner. Their eyes glowed yellow in the flashlight beam, and when they opened their mouths, God, the teeth. Rows of them, like shark teeth, but bigger. The one that had grabbed me, it was playing. It could have killed me right there, but instead it let go. They all started making this sound. It took me a second to realize they were laughing, not like human laughter, more like coughing mixed with growling, but I knew what it was. They thought this was funny. I scrambled backward, my hand finding a thick branch on the ground. I grabbed it, holding it up like a baseball bat. The creatures stopped laughing. The biggest one tilted its head like it was curious. Then it stepped forward, reached out with one massive hand, and snapped my branch in half like it was made of paper. My radio crackled again. Sarah's voice cut through the Will, the police are on their way, just hold on. The creatures' heads all snapped toward the sound of her voice. The big one, their leader, I guess, made a noise that sounded almost like words. The others nodded, like they understood. Then they all looked back at me. I knew what was about to happen. They weren't just going to kill me, they were going to make me suffer first, and then they were going to head toward the ranger station, toward Sarah. I couldn't let that happen. I had to do something, even if it meant I wouldn't make it out alive. Sometimes being scared can make you think clearer. I remembered something important. My emergency flare gun. Every ranger carries one. I slowly reached for it in my belt pouch, trying not to make any sudden moves. The creatures watched me, their yellow eyes glowing in the darkness. Probably thinking I was just shaking in fear, the big one took another step toward me. Its breath smelled like rotten meat, and I could see dried blood in its fur. My hand closed around the flare gun. I had one shot at this, just one. You want to play? I whispered, my voice shaking. Let's play! I yanked out the flare gun and fired it straight at the leader's face. The red light exploded like a tiny sun, and the creature let out a scream that sounded almost human. All 5 of them stumbled, thickly covering their eyes. These things were used to hunting in the dark. The bright light must have hurt them bad. I didn't waste a second. I jumped up and ran, snatching my flashlight from the ground as I passed it. Behind me, I could hear them crashing through the trees, but their movements were clumsy now. They were angry, really angry. Their howls didn't sound playful anymore. The ranger station was close. I could see its roof through the trees, just another few hundred feet. My lungs were burning, and my legs felt like they were made of lead, but I kept running. I had to warn Sarah. That's when I heard the sound that still gives me nightmares. It wasn't a howl or a growl. It was words. The big one. The leader. It spoke. Get him. The voice was deep and rough, like someone gargling with rocks, but it was definitely words. They could talk, they could think. They weren't just animals. I could hear them spreading out behind me, trying to surround me again. They were learning, adapting to my tricks. The flare had hurt them, but it had also made them madder. And now I had nothing left to fight with. The ranger station's lights were on. I could see Sarah's shadow moving inside. She was probably calling for help on the main radio. But would help arrive in time? And even if it did, what could regular police do against these things? I was 20 feet from the station's back door when I felt claws tear through my jacket. They'd caught up. I spun around, ready to face them. If I was going to die, I wasn't going to do it running. Not anymore. The creatures formed a half circle around me. Blood dripped down my back where the claws had caught me, but I barely felt it. My heart was beating so fast I thought it might explode. The leader stepped forward, its yellow eyes locked on mine. In the station's security lights, I could see its face clearly now. Scars crossed its snout and one ear was torn. This thing had been in plenty of fights before. Clever, human. Its voice was like rocks grinding together. But not clever enough. Behind me, I heard the station's door open. Sarah's voice rang out, "Will, get inside." The leader's eyes moved, past me, focusing on Sarah. Its mouth opened in what I can only call a smile, showing those rows of terrible teeth. That's when I knew in my gut what it was planning. It wanted Sarah to see what was about to happen to me. Then it would go after her. Something snapped inside me. Maybe it was fear, maybe it was anger, or maybe I just couldn't stand the thought of these things hurting anyone else. I reached into my pocket where I keep my lighter, the one I use to start controlled burns when needed. "Sarah," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, "get inside and lock the door. Now." But now! I heard the door slam shut. Good. At least she'd be safe for a few minutes. The leader took another step toward me. "Nowhere! To run!" "Who's running?" I said. Then I pulled out the lighter and my can of bear spray at the same time. The creatures tensed, probably expecting me to just spray them. But they didn't know what I knew. Bear spray is extremely flammable. I flicked the lighter and sprayed the bear spray through the flame. A stream of fire shot out, catching the leader right in the chest. Its fur went up like dry paper, and it let out a scream that shook the trees. The other creatures jumped back, confused and scared. They'd probably never seen fire used as a weapon before. The burning leader thrashed around, setting the grass on fire. The other creatures started backing away, their confidence broken by seeing their boss turn into a living torch. But I knew the fire wouldn't last long. And when it went out, I heard sirens in the distance. Police cars coming up the park road, but they were still minutes away. The leader was rolling on the ground, putting out the flames. It stood up slowly, its fur smoking, its eyes now glowing red with rage. "Kill!" it roared. All 5 of them charged at once. I raised my makeshift flamethrower, ready for one last fight. If this was how it ended, at least I'd go down fighting. At least I'd given Sarah a chance. What happened next probably saved my life. Sarah turned on the station's emergency floodlights. Suddenly, the whole area lit up bright as day. The creatures stopped their charge, howling in pain as the bright light hit their eyes. But the leader, the burned one, It kept coming. Its fur was still smoking, and its eyes were full of hate. It swung at me with those huge claws. I ducked, but not fast enough. Pain exploded across my shoulder as its claws caught me. Then the first police car crested the hill, sirens wailing, and lights flashing. More cars followed behind it. The creature's heads all snapped toward the noise and lights. Even the leader stopped attacking me. "Leave," the leader growled. "Not finished." The pack melted into the darkness between the trees, moving faster than anything that big should be able to move. The leader was last to go. It looked back at me one last time, and I swear I saw something in its eyes. Not just anger, but intelligence. A promise that this wasn't over. The police found me sitting on the ground, bleeding and shaking. Sarah was there too, holding a bandage to my shoulder. We told them what happened, but I could tell they didn't believe us. They wrote it down as a bear attack. That was 3 weeks ago. I'm still a ranger at Olympic National Park. I couldn't leave even if I wanted to. Someone needs to know what's really out there. Someone needs to be ready. I've made some changes, though. I don't do night patrols anymore. I carry extra flares, and I've rigged up some high-powered spotlights on my truck. Most importantly, I've started collecting stories, reports from other parks, old newspapers, anything that mentions creatures like the ones I saw. Because here's the thing that really scares me. I don't think these were the only ones. There are more packs out there hiding in other forests, other parks, watching, waiting, learning. Sometimes at night I still hear howls in the distance. They sound closer every time. And sometimes when the wind is just right, I swear I can hear words in those howls. The pack is out there, and they remember me. If you're reading this and you think you've seen something similar, something that walks like a man but isn't one, something with yellow eyes that glow in the dark, don't try to be a hero. Run. Run as fast as you can toward light and people, because if they catch you alone in the dark, well, I got lucky. You might not. Story 2. The face in my mirror wasn't mine this morning. I know how that sounds. I'm a park ranger, not some teenager telling ghost stories around a campfire. I've worked at Grand Canyon National Park for 8 years, and I've seen my share of weird things. Lost hikers walking in circles, mountain lions acting strange, and tourists doing absolutely crazy stuff. But nothing like this. Let me start from the beginning. My name is Catherine Reynolds, and until 3 weeks ago, my life was completely normal. I'm 35, divorced, and I live in a small ranger cabin near the south rim of the Grand Canyon. It's the kind of job most people think is exciting, but most days it's just me, my radio, and endless trails to patrol. That morning started like any other. I woke up at 5 a.m., made my coffee, black, 2 sugars, and headed to the bathroom to get ready. The sun wasn't up yet, and the bathroom light flickered like it always does. I kept meaning to fix that, but you know how it goes. I splashed some water on my face, reached for the towel, and when I looked up, something was wrong with my reflection. It was me, but not quite. Like someone had taken a photo of me and moved all my features just a tiny bit to the left. Blinked hard, rubbed my eyes, and looked again. Normal. Must have been the flickering light playing tricks on me, right? I tried to shake it off and started my morning routine. Every day I check the weather. Clear skies, thankfully. Radio into Jim's cheerful voice greeting me like always. And head out to patrol my section of the South Rim Trail. It's about 10 miles of the most beautiful views you'll ever see, but also some of the most dangerous cliffs in America. Around 8 a.m., I got my first call of the day. A tourist reported seeing someone walking way too close to the edge near Mather Point. Pretty common stuff. People don't realize how dangerous these cliffs are. But when I got there, something felt off. The tourist who reported it was an older man with a red baseball cap, looking pretty shaken up. I saw someone. He kept saying, "Bo," but they moved funny. Like their joints were all wrong. I've heard all sorts of stories from tourists. Usually it's just their imagination running wild or the heat getting to them. But the way he said it made the hair on my neck stand up. Then he said something that made my blood run cold. The person I saw They had your face, Ranger. But you weren't here yet. I laughed it off, of course. Told him it must have been another Ranger. We all wear the same uniform after all. But I couldn't stop thinking about my weird mirror moment that morning. And I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching me from the canyon shadows. That was just the beginning. I didn't know it then, but that ordinary morning was the start of something that would change everything I thought I knew about my canyon, about what's real and what's not, and about who or what might be wearing my face. If I'd known what was coming, I might have called in sick that day. But then again, maybe it wouldn't have mattered, because whatever was out there in the canyon, it was already watching me. That afternoon, things got worse. I was doing my usual trail check when my radio crackled. "Catherine, you there?" It was I. Jim from base. His voice sounded different, tighter, worried. "Yeah, what's up?" "We've got 2 missing hikers. Brother and sister, Mark and Sarah Chen. They were supposed to check in at their hotel last night, but never showed. Their car's still in the Bright Angel parking lot." My stomach did a little flip. Missing hikers aren't unusual at the Grand Canyon, but something about this felt different. "I'll start searching the Bright Angel Trail," I said, already turning around. The sun was getting lower, painting the canyon walls deep red. Usually I love this time of day, but now those shadows seemed darker, deeper somehow. I kept thinking about what the tourists said about seeing my face. About halfway down the trail, I found something. A blue water bottle half hidden under a bush. I picked it up and checked the label. There was a name written in neat handwriting. Sarah Chen. That's when I heard it. Footsteps on the trail behind me. I turned around, expecting to see another hiker, but the trail was empty. The footsteps stopped. I stood perfectly still, listening. Nothing but the wind. Then I saw something that made my heart stop. About 50 feet up the trail, there was a person standing completely still. They were wearing hiking clothes, but something was wrong with the way they stood. It reminded me of those wooden artists' dolls, like their joints weren't quite right. "Hello?" I called out, trying to keep my voice steady. "This is Park Ranger Reynolds. Do you need help?" The figure didn't move, didn't speak, just stood there. I took a step closer, and that's when I saw their face. It was Sarah Chen. I knew it was her because I'd just been looking at her photo on the missing persons report, but her face, it looked like it didn't quite fit. Like someone had put on a mask but hadn't lined it up properly. "Sarah." My hand went to my radio, but before I could press the button, she moved. It wasn't natural. Her head turned first, too far, like an owl. Then her body followed, jerky and wrong, and she started walking toward me. I've had self-defense training. I carry bear spray and know how to handle aggressive wildlife, but nothing prepared me for this. My whole body was screaming at me to run. "Stay back," I shouted, pulling out my bear spray. The figure kept coming. Then my radio crackled again, making me jump. Through the static, I heard a familiar voice. "Catherine, it's Sarah Chen. I'm at the ranger station. My brother and I got lost and spent the night in a cave, but we're okay. We just made it back up." I looked back at the trail. The figure was... But there, on the ground where it had stood, was a face. Not a real one, more like a photograph that had been peeled off something. It was my face from my ID badge, but stretched and distorted. With shaking hands, I took out my phone and snapped a picture. I needed proof. I needed to show someone I wasn't going crazy. Back at the station, Sarah and Mark Chen were fine. Tired. And embarrassed about getting lost, but fine. Normal, human. When I showed Jim the picture I took of the face on the trail, my phone only showed a blank patch of dirt. That night, I couldn't sleep. I covered all the mirrors in my cabin, but it didn't matter. Because every time I closed my eyes, I saw that figure on the trail. And I couldn't shake the feeling that somewhere out there in the darkness, someone, or something, was wearing my face. And it was getting better at it. The next few days turned into a nightmare. I started noticing little things first. My coffee cup wasn't where I left it. My hiking boots were tied differently. My bed looked like someone had laid in it while I was at work. I told myself I was just being paranoid. But then the phone calls started. "Catherine?" Jim's voice came through my phone one evening. Why did you ask Mrs. Martinez for her ID 3 times today? She said you kept forgetting you'd already checked it. My mouth went dry. Jim, I wasn't working the visitor center today. I was on the South Rim Trail all morning. There was a long silence. Then who? We both knew what it meant, but neither of us wanted to say it. The next day, I went to the local diner for lunch, something I always do on Thursdays. Sally, the waitress who's known me for years, gave me a strange look. "Didn't you just leave?" she asked. "Like 10 minutes ago?" My hand started shaking so bad I dropped my fork. What did they order?" "Same as always. Turkey sandwich, no mayo, extra pickles." She tilted her head. "You okay, Catherine? You look pale." That's when I knew for sure it wasn't just copying my face anymore. It knew my habits, my routines, my life. I went back to my cabin and pulled out my old laptop, started researching local legends, anything about creatures that could steal faces. That's when I found it. Stories about skinwalkers. Native American legends about beings that could take on other forms, but reading about it was a mistake, because that's when things got much, much worse. I was scrolling through an article when my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. When I opened it, my heart nearly stopped. It was a picture of me sitting at my laptop taken from outside my window. Right now, I jumped up and ran to the door, grabbing my flashlight. The beam cut through the darkness, sweeping across my small front yard. Nothing. Then my radio crackled. My own voice came through, but wrong, like someone trying to copy how I talk but not quite getting it right. "Catherine, there's something wrong at the canyon. I need help. Please come." I knew I shouldn't go. Every horror movie I'd ever seen was screaming at me not to go. But what if I was wrong? What if someone really needed help? I grabbed my gear, flashlight, radio, bear spray, first aid kit, standard ranger stuff. But this time I added something else. My grandfather's old silver knife. The legend said skinwalkers feared silver. The drive to the canyon was the longest 15 minutes of my life. The moon was full, making the canyon walls look like they were glowing. Any other night, they would have been beautiful. I parked at Mather Point and got out, flashlight beam bouncing off the rocks. "Hello?" I called out. "This is Ranger Reynolds." That's when I heard it, footsteps behind me. But this time, when I turned around, I wasn't alone. There were 3 of them, 3 me's, each one a perfect copy, wearing my ranger uniform, standing in a half circle. But their faces weren't quite right, like masks that were starting to melt. "We've been waiting," they said together in my voice. "We needed to practice, to get it right." One of them stepped forward, reaching for me with hands that bent the wrong way. "But we're better now. So much better." I backed up, feeling the edge of the canyon behind me. The silver knife felt heavy in my pocket, but I was starting to think it wouldn't be enough. Because now I understood what they'd been doing all this time. They hadn't just been practicing wearing my face. They'd been practicing being me, and they were ready for the final performance. I've never been more scared in my life than I was in that moment, standing at the edge of the Grand Canyon, facing 3 copies of myself. But fear does something strange to you. Sometimes it makes you stronger. What do you want? My voice shook, but I kept my flashlight steady, moving it between their faces. The one in the middle smiled, a horrible, wrong kind of smile that stretched too wide. "We want to be real. We want to live your life, but better." "There can't be 4 of me," I said, trying to sound braver than I felt. "People will notice." They laughed, a sound like rocks sliding down the canyon walls. "Oh, Catherine, there won't be 4 of us. Just one. The best one." That's when I understood their plan. They weren't going to share my life. They were going to take it. The first one lunged at me. I ducked and rolled, years of ranger training kicking in. My hand found the silver knife in my pocket, and I pulled it out. The sight of the knife made them pause, just for a second. But it was enough. I grabbed my radio and pressed the emergency button. "Jim, Mather Point, now!" One of them snatched the radio from my hand and threw it over the edge. I heard it bounce off the rocks below. "Nobody's coming," they said together. We made sure. We called them all away. There's a lost hiker at Bright Angel Point, except there isn't. They were smart. They'd planned this well, but they'd made one mistake. They'd chosen the Grand Canyon at night, and I knew these trails better than anyone, even better than something wearing my face. I turned and ran, not away from the canyon, but along the rim trail. I could hear them behind me, their footsteps wrong, like they had too many joints in. Their legs, the trail curved ahead. To most people it would look like a normal bend, but I knew what was really there. A maintenance path, hidden behind some rocks. A shortcut. I dove for it, rolling behind the rocks. In the moonlight I could see them run past, still following the main trail. For a moment I thought about running to my car, driving away, never coming back. But I knew I couldn't, because they would keep my face, keep my life. And who knew how? Many other people they would hurt? I pulled out my phone. No signal, of course, but I didn't need to call anyone. I just needed the camera. See, I'd learned something from my research. Skinwalkers couldn't stand seeing their true form. And in photos, that's what showed up. Not their stolen faces, but what they really were. I waited until they realized I wasn't ahead of them and started coming back. Then I stepped out, phone raised, camera flash ready. "Hey," I shouted. "Say cheese." The flash lit up the night like lightning. And in that bright moment, they saw themselves in my phone screen. Saw what they really were. The screams they made weren't human. Their faces melted. There's no other word for it. Like wax figures left in the sun. They clawed at themselves, trying to hold the stolen faces in place. But it was too late. I kept taking pictures, flash after flash. With each one, they seemed to lose more of themselves, their shapes twisting and shrinking. And then, just like that, they were gone. All that was left were 3 ranger uniforms crumpled on the ground. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely hold my phone. On the screen, the photos showed nothing, just empty air where they had been standing. I heard sirens in the distance. Someone must have heard the screams. How was I going to explain this? Who would believe me? But as I stood there, catching my breath, I realized something that made me smile just a little. They'd copied everything about me. My face, my voice, my habits. But they hadn't copied what really mattered. My knowledge, my experience, my connection to this place. They might have stolen my face, but they couldn't steal who I really was. It's been 3 months since that night at Mather Point. I'm still a ranger at the Grand Canyon. Still do my daily patrols. Still drink my coffee black with 2 sugars. Some things haven't changed, but other things, they're different now. I told Jim and the other rangers that I'd scared off some people who were vandalizing the park. They believed me, mostly because they found the empty ranger uniforms, and because the lost hiker call that night turned out to be fake. The official report says, unknown individuals impersonating park staff. Not exactly a lie, just not the whole truth. Sally, at the diner, still gives me funny looks sometimes, like she's making sure I'm the real Catherine. I don't blame her. Some mornings I check the mirror extra carefully myself. I keep the silver knife in my belt now next to my bear spray. The other rangers tease me about it, but they don't know. They don't understand that some nights, when the moon is full and the canyon shadows get deep, I hear footsteps that sound almost right, but not quite. Last week, a tourist asked me for directions. Normal stuff. But then she said something that made my skin crawl. Funny, I could have sworn I just got the same directions from another ranger who looked just like you. I took her picture right there, pretending it was for the park's visitor. Photos, nothing strange showed up in it. But still, I walked her to her destination myself. Just to be sure, the photos from that night are still on my phone, even though they show nothing. Sometimes I look at them, remembering, reminding myself it was real. I've learned some things from all this, like how a face isn't what makes you who you are, how knowing something is out there doesn't mean you have to live in fear, and how sometimes the scariest things aren't the monsters themselves, but the idea that they could be anyone, anywhere. But I've also learned something else. They're not as smart as they think they are. They can copy our faces, our voices, our habits, but they can't copy our connections to places, to people, to who we really are inside. Yesterday, I found something that gave me hope. I was hiking down near Bright Angel Trail, checking on some signs that needed fixing. There was a cave I'd never noticed before. Inside, I found old drawings on the wall, Native American art, showing figures with twisted bodies and borrowed faces. But it also showed people fighting back, protecting themselves. I wasn't the first one to face these things, and I probably won't be the last. So I stay here, watching, protecting my canyon. Because that's who I am. Not just a face, not just a uniform, but a guardian of this place. And if they come back, well, my phone's always charged. My silver knife is sharp, and I know every trail, every shadow, every hiding place in these canyon. Walls, let them try to wear my face again. This time I'll be ready. Some people say the Grand Canyon has secrets. They're right. But now I'm one of those secrets too, and I'm keeping watch. Because the next time someone reports seeing a ranger who moves a little strange, or speaks in a voice that's not quite right, they won't be copying me, but they might just meet me, and I know exactly what to do. Story 3. I've seen things in these mountains that I can't explain, things that shouldn't exist. But before I tell you what happened that winter, you need to know that I'm not crazy. I've been a park ranger for 15 years, and until 1968, I thought I knew everything about these mountains. I was wrong. Dead wrong. My name is Bob Martinez, and this is my story. It started on a Tuesday in early December, the kind of morning where your breath freezes in front of your face and the snow crunches under your boots like broken glass. I was doing my usual rounds in Rocky Mountain National Park, checking on the few brave campers who decided to stay despite the weather warnings. We'd been getting more snow than usual that year, and something felt different, wrong. I remember sitting in my ranger station, warming my hands with a cup of coffee when the first report came in. A family of 3 hadn't returned from their hiking trip. Now, missing hikers weren't unusual. People got lost all the time. But this was different. They were experienced hikers, and they had all the right gear. Plus, their car was still in. The parking lot covered in 2 days' worth of snow. Probably just holed up in a cabin somewhere, my colleague Tom said when I told him. But I could see the worry in his eyes. We'd already lost 4 hikers that month, more than we'd ever lost, in a whole winter before. I pulled out my map and marked the spots where people had gone missing. Something caught my eye. All the disappearances formed a rough circle around the North Ridge, an area the local Native Americans called the Hungry Ground. I'd always thought it was just an old name, maybe from some long-ago famine. I should have paid more attention to their warnings. That afternoon, I drove up to check on old Joe, a Ute elder who lived on the edge of the park. He'd been here longer than anyone, and he knew these mountains better than I ever would. When I pulled up to his cabin, he was already waiting on his porch, like he knew I was coming. "Been expecting you, Bob," he said, his wrinkled face serious. "The signs are back?" "Signs?" I asked, following him inside his warm cabin. Joe's hands shook as he poured us both tea. "The animals are leaving. First the deer, then the elk. Even the wolves are running. They know what's coming." He looked me straight in the eye. "It's hunting season," I remember laughing nervously. "Bear?" Joe shook his head slowly. "Worse. Much worse. The old people called it Wendigo. The cold one. The hungry one. It wakes up when winters are longest and food is scarce." He grabbed my arm, his grip surprisingly strong. "You've got to close the north trails, Bob. All of them. Before more people disappear." I didn't believe him. Not then. Sure, his words gave me chills, but I was a modern man, a ranger with scientific training. I dealt with bears, mountain lions, and angry moose. Whatever was happening, I thought I could handle it. That night, as I sat in my cabin writing up reports, the wind started howling. Not the usual mountain wind. This sound was different. It almost seemed to form words like someone crying out in pain. My dog Buck, who'd faced down bears without flinching, crawled under my desk whimpering. The radio crackled. "Bob, you there?" It was Jenny from dispatch. "We've got another missing person report. College kid, solo hiker. Last seen heading toward, the North Ridge." I looked out my window at the swirling snow, then down at my trembling dog. That's when I knew something was very wrong in my mountains, and I had to find out what it was before anyone else disappeared. I just wish I'd listened to old Joe sooner. Maybe then things would have turned out different. The next morning, I packed my gear and headed out to search for the missing college kid. The sun was barely up, painting the snow a pale pink, but it didn't make anything feel warmer. If anything, the cold seemed to bite deeper than usual. I parked my truck at the North Ridge trailhead and checked my backpack one last time. Flashlight, first aid kit, radio, extra batteries, and enough supplies for 2 days. Buck stayed close to my legs, which wasn't like him at all. Usually he'd be running ahead, sniffing everything in sight. "What's got you so scared, boy?" I whispered, patting his head. His ears were flat against his skull, and he kept looking back toward the truck. The first strange thing I noticed was the silence. Winter mornings in the mountains are usually quiet, sure, but not like this. No birds, no squirrels, nothing. Just the sound of snow crunching under my boots and my own breathing. About 2 miles up the trail, Buck suddenly stopped. His whole body went stiff, and a low growl rumbled in his throat. That's when I saw the campsite. It was a mess. The tent was still standing, but something had torn one side open. Not like a bear attack. Bears usually knock the whole tent down. This was different. More deliberate. Like someone had used a knife, except the tears were too jagged. I called out, "Hello? Park ranger?" My voice seemed to disappear into the snow. No answer. Inside the tent, everything was frozen solid. A sleeping bag was still zipped up, with a book lying next to it. The weird part? No footprints leading away from the tent. Just one set of tracks leading to it. Probably from our missing hiker. But there was something else. Something that made my stomach turn. These other tracks in the snow. They looked almost human, but wrong, too big. Each print was nearly twice the size of my boot. And the spacing between them was huge, like whatever made them had legs twice as long as mine. Buck wouldn't go near them. He kept backing away, whining. I took pictures with my camera and pulled out my radio. "Jenny, you there?" Static crackled before her voice came through. "Here, Bob, find anything?" "Yeah, found the kid's campsite. Something's not right. Can you send Tom up here and maybe call old Joe too?" "Old Joe? That's not standard procedure." "I know, but..." I stopped. Through the static of the radio, I heard something else. A sound like branches breaking, but slower, deliberate, close. Buck's growl turned into a high-pitched whine. "Jenny, I'll call you back." I turned slowly, scanning the trees. The breaking sounds had stopped, but I could feel something. Like when you know someone's watching you, but you can't see them. Then I saw it, about 50 yards away between 2 pine trees. At first I thought it was just snow falling from a branch. But snow doesn't move like that. And snow doesn't stand 9 feet tall. The thing was pale white, like something that had never seen the sun. For a split second I saw its face, or what should have been its face. Its mouth. God, its mouth was all wrong. Too wide. Too many teeth. Then it moved. I've seen mountain lions sprint. I've seen bears charge. Nothing moves like this thing did. 1 second it was by the trees. The next it was 20 yards closer. No sound, no warning. Just closer. Buck barked once, then took off running back down the trail. Smart dog. I ran too, didn't look back, didn't stop to think, just ran. The only sound was my own breathing and the blood pounding in my ears. But somehow, I knew it was following. Not chasing. Following. Like it was playing with me. When I finally reached my truck, my hands were shaking so bad I could barely get the key in the ignition. As I drove away, I caught a glimpse of something white in my rearview mirror, standing at the edge of the trees. It raised one long, pale arm, like it was waving goodbye. That's when I knew old Joe was right. This wasn't a bear, or a mountain lion, or anything else I'd been trained to deal with. This was something else, something that shouldn't exist, and it was hunting in my mountains. I drove straight to old Joe's cabin. My hands wouldn't stop shaking, and I kept checking the rearview mirror, half expecting to see that pale figure following my truck. Buck sat in the passenger seat, still trembling. Old Joe was waiting on his porch again, a thermos of hot coffee in his hands. One look at my face and he knew. "You saw it," he said. It wasn't a question. Inside his warm cabin, I told him everything while he poured coffee into 2 mugs. When I finished, he was quiet for a long time. "We need to organize a search party," I finally said. "That college kid could still be alive." Old Joe shook his head slowly. "Not today. Storm's coming. Big one." He was right. I could feel it in the air, that heavy feeling before a blizzard. But I couldn't just sit and do nothing. "Joe, there are 5 people missing now. 5. And if we go up there unprepared, there'll be more," he said firmly. "Listen, Bob, the Wendigo, it's not just hungry for food, it's hungry for the hunt. It plays with its prey, makes them run, makes them scared. And the more scared they get, the more it enjoys the chase." I thought about how it had stood there in the woods just watching me run. Like a cat playing with a mouse? Worse. Joe got up and walked to an old wooden chest in the corner. My grandfather fought one back in the winter of 1902. He was the only survivor of his hunting party. He pulled out something wrapped in leather, an old rifle with strange symbols carved into the stock. "A gun won't stop it," I said. "Will it?" "Not regular bullets, but these." He opened a small box. Inside were bullets that looked like they were made of silver, with more symbols etched into them. My grandfather made these, said they were the only things that worked. I wanted to laugh it off. Silver bullets, like in a werewolf movie? But after what I'd seen, "How many do you have?" 6. He handed me the rifle in the box. "Don't miss." That's when my radio crackled to life. Through the static, I heard Tom's voice. "Bob? You there?" Something weird up at the North Ridge. Tracks in the snow. Like nothing I've ever... Wait. There was a pause. Oh God, I see it. It's... The radio went dead. I jumped up, but old Joe grabbed my arm. "The storm," he said, pointing out the window. The sky had turned dark gray and snow was already starting to fall. "It's using the weather, using it to hunt." "Tom's up there," I said, checking the rifle. "I have to go." Joe nodded slowly. "Wait. Here until the storm hits full force. That's when it'll be feeding. That's when Tom will be. When you might still have a chance to save him. How will I find him in a blizzard?" "You won't have to." Joe's eyes were dark. "Follow the screams." I spent the next few hours at Joe's cabin, watching the storm get worse. He taught me how to load the special bullets, where to aim, the heart or the head. Nothing else would work. And most importantly, how to know when it was close. "The cold gets worse," he said. "Worse than any natural cold. And you'll feel hungry. So hungry you think you might die. That's how it tricks people. Makes them so desperate for food they'll follow it anywhere." By late afternoon, the storm was howling outside. The snow was so thick I could barely see Joe's front porch. But through the wind, I heard something that made my blood freeze. A scream, far away but clear. "Human. That's my signal," I said, standing up. Buck whined and pressed against my legs. "No," Joe said. "The dog stays here. It won't help you where you're going." He handed me a small leather pouch. "Medicine bag. Might help keep your mind clear when it tries to trick you." I put on my heaviest winter gear, checked the rifle one last time, and stepped out into the storm. The wind hit me like a fist in the cold. Joe was right. This wasn't natural cold. This was something else. As I got into my truck, Joe called out one last time. "Remember, Bob, no matter what you see, no matter what you hear, don't trust your eyes. The Wendigo is a trickster. It'll try to make you see things that aren't there." I nodded, started the engine, and drove toward the screams, toward the North Ridge, toward the monster that was hunting in my mountains. I just hoped I wasn't too late to save Tom, or anyone else who might still be alive up there. The drive to the North Ridge was the longest 20 minutes of my life. The snow was falling so thick I could barely see past my headlights, and the wind rocked my truck like it was made of paper. But worse than the storm was the cold. It wasn't just freezing anymore. It felt like the cold was somehow getting inside my bones. I parked where I had this morning and grabbed my gear, flashlight, the rifle with the silver bullets, and Joe's medicine bag. The screams had stopped, but now I heard something else through the wind, a sound like someone calling my name. Bob, help me. It sounded exactly like Tom. I gripped the rifle tighter. Joe had warned me about this. The Wendigo could trick you, make you hear things. But what if it really was Tom? What if he was still alive? The wind died down for a moment, and that's when I saw the first body. It was half buried in snow, frozen. Solid, not Tom, one of the missing hikers. The way they were lying. It looked like they'd been running from something. I had to force myself to keep moving. Bob, please. Tom's voice again, closer now. I followed the sound, my flashlight beam cutting through the swirling snow. Every few steps, I had to stop and catch my breath. The cold was getting worse, and I felt so hungry it hurt, like I hadn't eaten in days. Then I found Tom's tracks in the snow. They led to a small cave in the rocks, the kind of place someone might hide if they were being chased. Inside, I could see a faint light, like from a flashlight. "Tom?" I called out, trying to keep my voice steady. "It's Bob. I'm here to help." "In here," Tom's voice called back. "Hurry!" I started toward the cave, then stopped. Something wasn't right. The track, they only went into the cave. None coming out. Just like at the college kid's tent. I pointed my flashlight at the cave entrance again. The light inside wasn't moving, like a flashlight should. It was too steady. And it wasn't yellow. It was pale white, like moonlight on snow, like the thing I'd seen in the woods. I backed away slowly, my heart pounding. The light in the cave got brighter. And then I saw it, a hand reaching out, a long white hand with fingers that were too long, too thin. "Bob." Not Tom's voice anymore. This voice was different, wrong, like ice breaking. "So hungry, Bob." I raised the rifle just as it came out of the cave. In the daylight, I hadn't gotten a good look at it. Now I saw everything. It was tall, so tall it had to bend down to get through the cave entrance. Its skin was stretched tight over its bones, white as fresh snow. But its face, God, its face. The mouth opened way too wide, filled with sharp teeth like icicles. And its eyes, they looked almost human. And somehow that was the worst part. It smiled at me. Actually smiled. "Want to play?" it asked in Tom's voice. Then it moved. I fired. The sound was so loud in the quiet snow that it felt like my ears would burst. The thing screamed. A sound like winter wind through dead trees, and fell back. For a second I thought I'd killed it. Then it got back up. The silver bullet had hit it right in the chest. There was a smoking hole there, but it was already closing. Healing. I ran. Behind me I heard it laughing. A horrible sound like breaking ice and screaming wind all mixed together. I didn't look back. Just ran and ran, stumbling through the deep snow, trying to remember which way my truck was. The world had turned into a white blur. The storm was getting worse, and the cold was so bad I could barely feel my fingers on the rifle. Somewhere in the back of my mind, I remembered Joe's warning about the cold. About the hunger. This was how it hunted. It made you so cold and hungry that you couldn't think straight. Made you weak. Made you slow. I heard it moving behind me, taking its time, playing with me, just like it had played with all the others. When I finally saw my truck through the snow, I almost cried with relief. I was fumbling with the keys when I heard Tom's voice one last time, right behind me. "Don't you want to help your friend, Bob?" I turned around, raising the rifle. 5 silver bullets left. The Wendigo stood there in the swirling snow, grinning its terrible grin. In one of its long white hands, it held something. something that used to be wearing a park ranger uniform. That's when I knew for sure Tom was gone. Had probably been gone since that first radio call. And now this thing was going to kill me too, just like it had killed all the others, unless I could stop it. I raised the rifle, my hands shaking from cold and fear. The Wendigo just kept grinning, like it knew something I didn't. Maybe it did, but I knew something too. This was my mountain, my home. And I wasn't going to let this thing keep hunting here. I aimed carefully, remembering everything Joe had told me. The heart or the head. Don't miss. The Wendigo took a step forward, its mouth opening impossibly wide. I pulled the trigger. The silver bullet hit it right between the eyes. The Wendigo's head snapped back and it let out a scream that shook snow from the trees. But it didn't fall. Instead, it looked at me with those two human eyes, and I watched as the bullet wound started to close up just like the first one had. 4 bullets left. It moved faster than before, angry now. I fired again and again, hitting it in the chest. The shoulder, the neck. Each shot made it stumble, but it kept coming. The bullets were hurting it, but not enough. 1 bullet left. The Wendigo was only a few feet away now. I could smell its breath, like dead things frozen in ice. My fingers were so cold I could barely feel the trigger. The hunger in my stomach was so bad I wanted to curl up in a ball. That's when I remembered Joe's medicine bag, still in my pocket. The heart or the head, Joe had said. But I'd shot it in both places, and it was still coming. The Wendigo reached, for me with those long white fingers, its mouth opening wide enough to swallow my head whole. In desperation, I pulled out the medicine bag and threw it straight into that terrible mouth. The thing that happened next, I still have trouble believing. The Wendigo stopped. Just stopped. Its eyes went wide and it started making this awful choking sound. The medicine bag must have had something in it. Something old Joe knew would hurt it. I didn't waste any time thinking about it. I raised the rifle one last time, aimed right at its open mouth where the medicine bag had gone, and fired my last bullet. The shot echoed through the mountains like thunder. The Wendigo's head exploded, there's no other way to say it. But instead of blood and bone, it was like watching ice shatter. The rest of its body started breaking apart too, cracking and splitting like a frozen lake in spring. Then it just fell apart, crashed to the ground in 1,000 pieces of ice that melted away into nothing, like they'd never been real at all. The storm stopped almost immediately. The unnatural cold faded, and the horrible hunger in my stomach went away. In the sudden quiet, I could hear my own heart pounding. I found the others' bodies, all of them. Tom, the college kid, the missing family. We brought them down from the mountain the next day. The official report said they died from exposure and animal attacks. Nobody would have believed the truth anyway. Old Joe just nodded when I told him what happened. He took the rifle back but told me to keep what was left of the medicine bag, just in case. I asked him what was in it, but he just smiled and said some things are better not knowing. That was 15 years ago. I still work as a ranger in Rocky Mountain National Park. Most days, it's just a normal job, helping lost hikers, checking trails, watching for regular dangers like bears and storms. But every winter, when the nights get long and the snow gets deep, I keep that medicine bag close. I watch the weather reports extra careful, and if anyone reports strange tracks in the snow or hearing voices in the storm, well, let's just say I know who to call. Because the thing about the Wendigo is, old Joe told me later, there's never just one. They sleep for decades, sometimes centuries. But when they wake up hungry, and winter comes every year. I still love these mountains. They're my home. But now I know what my grandfather knew, what every ranger should know. Sometimes, the most dangerous things in nature are the ones they don't tell you about in training. The ones that hide in plain sight, waiting in the shadows between what we think we know and what we're afraid to believe. So if you're ever hiking in the Rockies in winter and you hear someone calling your name in the storm, don't answer. Don't. Follow? Just get somewhere warm and safe as fast as you can, and hope that I'm nearby with my medicine bag and old Joe's number on speed dial. Because the cold feast never really ends. It just waits for the next winter, the next storm, the next hungry moment. And sometimes on the coldest nights, I still hear it calling my name. I've seen things in the ice that no one would believe, things that still haunt my dreams and make my missing hand ache in the cold. My name is James Hawthorne, Jim to most folks around here, and I've been a park ranger at Denali National Park for nearly 30 years. This is the story of how I lost my hand and almost lost my soul to something ancient and hungry that lives in these frozen mountains. It all started 3 months ago, during what should have been a normal January. Patrol. The weather had been strange that winter, stranger than any I'd seen in my 52 years in Alaska. Being native Alaskan, I grew up learning to read the signs of nature from my people. The elders taught me that when nature acts weird, it's usually trying to warn us about something. I should have listened harder. That morning, the temperature dropped 40 degrees in just 2 hours. Now, Alaska's known for crazy weather, but this was different. The sky turned a weird greenish color, like the northern lights got stuck halfway. My radio kept crackling with static, and all the animals, even the tough winter creatures like caribou and wolves, were running south like their tails were on fire. Then we found the first body. It was a young climber, Tommy Chen, an experienced guy who knew these mountains well. We found him frozen solid, standing straight up like a statue, 30 feet up a sheer rock face. The weird part? There wasn't any climbing gear on him. No ropes, no harness, nothing. It was like something had just placed him there, like a toy on a shelf. The look on his face, and I'll never forget it. Pure terror frozen in time. The medical examiner said he'd frozen so fast that the ice crystals in his blood were microscopic, something that's supposed to be impossible. I'd seen people freeze to death before. It's part of the job up here, but never like this. The doc said it would have taken temperatures of minus 200 degrees to freeze someone that fast. In January, our coldest temps barely hit minus 40. That's when the memories of my father came flooding back. 25 years ago, he disappeared in an ice cave, not far from where we found Tommy. They never found his body, but his journal. His journal talked about something in the ice, something that moved, something that hunted. I'd been drunk for 10 years after Dad vanished, trying to forget those words. Now, stone cold sober for 5 years, I was starting to think maybe the drink hadn't been playing tricks on my mind when I read his journal. Maybe he'd been trying to warn us all. Over the next 2 weeks, things got worse. We found dead animals all over the park. Moose, bears, even birds. All flash frozen like Tommy. The strange lights people reported from the ice caves got brighter and more frequent. Climbers swore they saw shadows moving inside solid glaciers. The tribal elders in my mother's village started hanging protective charms and refusing to go out after dark. Then Sarah, one of our junior rangers, found something in an ice cave that changed everything. Carved into the wall were ancient symbols, the kind my grandmother used to draw to ward off evil spirits. But these weren't meant to keep something out. They were meant to keep something in. Right about then, wouldn't you know it, a fancy research team from some university down south showed up. They said they were here to study the unusual weather patterns. As I watched their helicopters land, bringing their high-tech equipment and their city attitudes, I felt my missing hand tingle. The hand I didn't lose yet. I knew right then that most of these people weren't going to make it home alive. The research team set up their camp near the base of Glacier Point. There were 6 of them. Dr. Emily Chen, she reminded me that she wasn't related to poor Tommy. 2 weather experts named Mike and David, a wildlife specialist named Maria, and 2 graduate students, Jack and Lisa. They brought enough fancy equipment to fill a small warehouse. I didn't want to tell them about my dad's journal at first. Who'd believe a story about something living in the ice? But after their 3rd day of weird readings, Dr. Chen pulled me aside. "Ranger Hawthorne," she said, checking something on her tablet. We're getting temperature drops that don't make any sense. The cold spots move, like they're alive. She looked up at me with worried eyes. Have you ever seen anything like this? My hands were shaking as I pulled out my father's old journal from my coat pocket. The leather was cracked and faded, but his messy handwriting was still clear. I'd started carrying it with me ever since we found Tommy. My father was a ranger here too, I said quietly. Before he disappeared, he wrote about something in the ice, something that hunted. Dr. Chen read the journal entries, her face getting paler with each page. The way Dad described it, the creature could somehow melt into the ice itself, becoming part of the glacier. It made its own storms to trap its prey. And worst of all, it didn't just take people's warmth, it took their memories too. That night, the temperature dropped so fast our coffee froze solid in our cups. The wind picked up, howling like a wounded animal. But under that sound was something else. A deep rumbling, like ice cracking, but with a pattern to it. Almost like breathing. "Everyone inside!" I shouted, but it was too late. The storm came, out of nowhere. A wall of white so thick you couldn't see your hand in front of your face. The wind wasn't just cold, it felt hungry. I could hear the research team shouting, trying to find each other in the whiteout. Then I heard the screams. Mike went first. We found him later, frozen solid like Tommy had been. David, Maria, and Lisa disappeared into the storm. The ice had taken them so fast they didn't even have time to radio for help. Dr. Chen and Jack made it back to the main cabin with me, but they were different after that. There were gaps in their memories. Simple things, like their middle names, or their favorite foods. The thing in the ice had taken more than just their colleagues. That night, as we huddled around the emergency heater, I finally understood what my father's journal had been warning us about. The creature hadn't just woken up. It was hungry after decades of sleep, and we had walked right into its hunting grounds. I found a page in Dad's journal I'd never noticed before. It was stuck to another page, hidden all these years. There was a pattern to when the creature woke up. Every 30 years, when the northern lights were strongest. Dad had been there for the last cycle, and now it was our turn. Dr. Chen's equipment was picking up something big moving through the glaciers, leaving trails of impossible cold behind it. The patterns formed a spiral, and we were at the center. It wasn't just hunting randomly anymore. It was herding us like a smart predator corralling its prey. Jack looked out the window at the swirling snow and said what we were all thinking. It's playing with us. We tried calling for help, but the radios were dead. The satellite phone, too. Even Dr. Chen's fancy equipment was freezing up. The creature was cutting us off, trapping us up here with it. And somewhere in the storm, I could hear that sound again. That deep, rhythmic rumbling, like ancient ice shifting. Like something big breathing, like something getting closer. Morning came, but it didn't bring any light. The storm was still raging, and now the snow was forming strange shapes, like tunnels and caves made of ice. I'd never seen anything like it. It was as if the creature was building a maze around us. We need to move, I told Dr. Chen and Jack. The cabin's not safe anymore. I could hear the ice creaking under the floorboards. The creature was getting bolder, coming closer. We packed what we could carry, emergency supplies, some of Dr. Chen's smaller equipment, and my father's journal. 2 local guides, Pete and Marcus, had made it to our cabin during the night. They knew these mountains as well as I did, which made what happened next even harder to accept. We tried to reach the ranger station 4 miles south. Pete was leading the way, using his compass to guide us through the storm. But something was wrong with the directions. The compass kept spinning, and our GPS devices showed us in different places every time we checked. It's messing with the equipment, Dr. Chen said, her voice shaking. It's hurting us somewhere. She was right. Every path we took led us to the same place, a huge ice cave that hadn't been there the day before. The entrance was smooth, like it had been carved by something intelligent. Marcus took one look at the cave and started backing away. "This isn't right," he said. "We need to." We never heard the end of that sentence. A spike of ice, clear as glass and sharp as a spear, shot, out of the snow and went right through him. It happened so fast none of us had time to scream. Pete tried to run, but another ice spike caught him too. They both froze solid in seconds, their faces frozen in surprise. That's when we saw it for the first time. It rose up from the snow like it was made of the storm itself. Its body was like shifting ice, sometimes clear, sometimes white, with deep blue shadows moving inside it. It was huge, maybe twice as tall as me, and where its face should have been, there was just a dark hole that seemed to pull at you, like it was trying to drink in your warmth. "Run!" I shouted, but my voice sounded weak against the howling wind. We ran into the ice cave. It was our only choice. Behind us, I could hear the creature moving, its feet crunching in the snow. It wasn't rushing, it knew we were trapped. The cave was a maze of ice tunnels, all of them looking the same. Our flashlights bounced off the walls, making weird shadows. Sometimes I thought I saw things frozen in the ice, old pieces of equipment, maybe even bodies. I tried not to look too closely. Jack was falling behind. The cold was getting to him. Dr. Chen and I tried to help him, but he kept getting confused, forgetting where he was. The creature was taking his memories piece by piece. Then my partner showed up, Steve Martinez, my fellow ranger for the time. Past 10 years, I was so happy to see him I almost cried, but something was wrong. His movements were stiff and his eyes were like frozen glass. "Steve?" I reached out to touch his shoulder. My hand went right through him. He was made of ice, just another trick by the creature. Before my eyes, Steve's ice form started to crack and break apart. As he shattered, I saw the real Steve's body frozen, inside the wall behind him, perfectly preserved like he was sleeping. The creature had killed my best friend, and now it was using his shape to toy with us. Dr. Chen screamed. Jack had stopped moving. The cold had taken him while we were distracted. His body was already covered in a thin layer of frost, his eyes open but seeing nothing. We were down to just two now, me and Dr. Chen. The creature's breathing was getting louder, echoing through the ice tunnels. It wasn't just hunting us anymore. It was enjoying itself. I gripped my ice axe tighter, knowing it probably wouldn't do any good against something that could become one with the ice itself. But I wasn't going to die without a fight. Then I remembered something from my father's journal, a detail I'd overlooked before. The creature avoided the deep caves near the old volcano. Dad had written something about heat, about the ancient stories of fire and ice. That's when I had an idea. A terrible, dangerous idea. But before I could tell Dr. Chen, the ice wall beside us exploded inward. The creature had found us, and this time, it wasn't playing around anymore. The creature filled the tunnel, its icy body scraping against the walls. Dr. Chen and I ran, our boots slipping on the frozen ground. My flashlight beam caught something ahead. A deep crack in the cave wall, barely wide enough for a person. Hot air was coming from it. "This way!" I grabbed Dr. Chen's arm and pulled her toward the crack. We squeezed through just as the creature's ice spike arm slashed where we'd been standing. The tunnel we entered was different from the others. The walls weren't smooth. They were rough and dark. Steam rose from small cracks in the ground. We were in one of the old volcanic vents, just like in Dad's journal. The creature hesitated at the entrance. The heat was bothering it. But then, it started to change, making its ice body thinner, trying to fit through the crack after us. "Keep going," I told Dr. Chen. "Follow the heat." I pulled out the emergency flares from my pack. The creature wanted heat. I'd give it heat. The thing was halfway through the crack when I lit the first flare. The bright red light filled the tunnel, and the creature made a sound, like ice cracking, but also like a scream. Where the flare's heat touched it, its icy body started to melt, but it didn't retreat. Instead, it got angry. The temperature dropped so fast my nose started bleeding. Ice crystals formed on my eyelashes. The creature was using all its power, trying to freeze us before the heat could weaken it more. Dr. Chen had reached a larger cave ahead. Steam was pouring from a huge crack in the ground, an old volcanic vent. The heat made the air shimmer. "Jim!" she shouted. "The thermal scanner, look!" She pointed her equipment at the creature. The screen showed something strange. In the center of the ice monster was a dark core, like a frozen heart. Every time the heat from the vent touched it, the creature flinched. That's when I remembered the last page of Dad's journal. The tribal elders had told him about an ancient ritual, a way to trap evil spirits in the ice. But it wasn't just words, it was a trap. You had to make the spirit become solid, make it whole, and then break it. I lit all my remaining flares at once. The heat and light filled the tunnel like a mini sun. The creature shrieked, its ice body starting to melt faster. "Get back!" I yelled to Dr. Chen. "When it follows me, push it into the vent." I ran straight at the creature. Flares held out in front of me like torches. It was a crazy plan, but it was our only chance. The monster reared up, trying to dodge the flares. But in the narrow tunnel, it couldn't move far. The heat was forcing it to become more solid, less able to melt into the ice walls. I got close, too close. One of its ice spike arms caught my right hand, freezing it solid instantly. The pain was worse than anything I'd ever felt, but I kept going. "Now!" I screamed. Dr. Chen appeared behind the creature with a long piece of broken ice she was using like a pole. As I dove to the side, she pushed with all her strength. The creature, still trying to strike at me, lost its balance. It fell backward, right into the steam vent. When its frozen core hit the hot air, the sound was like 1,000 windows breaking. At once, the creature's ice body shattered. Pieces of it flew everywhere. One of them hit my frozen hand, shattering it too. I barely felt it. I was too busy watching the dark core fall into the vent's depths, melting as it went. The storm outside stopped instantly. The unnatural cold disappeared. In the sudden quiet, I could hear Dr. Chen breathing hard and my own blood dripping onto the cave floor. It was over. But as I looked at where my right hand used to be, I knew some part of the creature's cold would stay with me forever. I could feel it in my bones, in the way the stumps of my fingers ached when snow was coming. Dr. Chen helped me out of the cave. Only 3 of us had survived. Me, her, and a story no one would ever believe. The research team's equipment had all frozen and shattered. Even the thermal readings were gone. We had no proof of what had happened. But I didn't need proof. I had Dad's journal, my missing hand, and a new sense about the cold. Sometimes, on dark winter nights, I can feel when the ice is moving strangely. I know where the dangerous spots are, the places where the snow is just a little too quiet. Because even though we destroyed that creature, the elders say there's more than one of them, sleeping in the ancient ice. And sooner or later, when the northern lights are right and the winter is dark enough, they'll wake up hungry again. But next time, we'll be ready. It's been 5 years since that night in the ice caves. I'm still a ranger at Denali, but things are different now. My right hand is gone, replaced by a simple prosthetic that I only wear when I have to. Most days, I let the stump show. It's a reminder of what's really out there in the deep ice. Dr. Chen visits every winter. She's the only other person who really understands what happened. We meet at the old ranger station, drink coffee, and watch the snow fall. Sometimes we talk about the others: Steve, Jack, Pete, Marcus, and all the rest. Their families were told they died in a freak storm. In a way, I guess that's true. The ice caves where we fought the creature collapsed that spring. The Park Service said it was normal melting, but I know better. The heat from the volcanic vent had weakened everything. Nature was helping us hide the evidence. But the strangest thing is what the ice did to me. Ever since that night, I can feel changes in the cold. Not just normal weather changes. I'm talking about the unnatural kind. When my missing hand starts to ache, I know something's wrong with the ice. It's like the creature left a piece of itself in me. A warning system. Last month, some hikers went missing near the North Glacier. The official report says they fell into a crevasse, but I found their equipment scattered over half a mile. No, Creepiest is that. The ice where they disappeared was colder than it should have been, and my hand ached the whole time I was up there. I've started keeping my own journal, just like Dad did. I write down everything I notice: the cold spots, the strange ice formations, the times when animals avoid certain areas for no reason. Dr. Chen helps me map it all out on her computer. We're looking for patterns, trying to predict when and where the next creature might wake up. The tribal elders were right. There are more of them out there, sleeping in the ancient ice. Sometimes on really quiet nights I can hear them breathing, deep under the glaciers. They're waiting for their time to wake up, just like the one we fought did. But now we know how to fight them. I've been teaching the other rangers about the warning signs, though I don't tell them everything. Just enough to keep them alive if they ever meet what I met in those caves. I still patrol the park every day, watching the ice, listening to its secrets. People ask me why I stay, knowing what's out there. The truth is, someone has to stand guard. Someone has to remember what happens when the ice wakes up hungry. So I keep walking these frozen trails, my missing hand aching when storms come in. And if you're ever up here in Denali during the winter, and you see strange lights in the ice or feel a cold that goes deeper than your bones, find me. I'll be the one-handed ranger who watches the glaciers, because I know what lives in the deep ice, and I know it's only sleeping. Story 5. The day I found the footprint in the snow, bigger than any bear's and steaming like a hot spring, was the day I started to question everything I knew about Yellowstone, and about what really lives in these woods. My name's Marcus Sullivan, and I've been a park ranger here for 15 years, long enough to know every trail, every geyser, and every sound these mountains make. Or at least, I thought I did. That morning started like any other winter day in the park. The sky was the kind of gray that promises snow, and the air was cold enough to make your nose hurt when you breathed. I was doing my usual patrol, checking on the tourists who were crazy enough to visit Yellowstone in January. Most people think the park's dead in winter. They're wrong. It's more alive than ever, just in a different way. The steam vents were extra active that morning, sending clouds of white mist into the freezing air. It's always weird how the ground can be so hot while everything else is frozen solid. Like having a pot of boiling water in the middle of an ice cube. The smell of sulfur, kind of like rotten eggs, was stronger than usual too. After all these years, I still haven't gotten used to that smell. I was walking near one of the less popular hot springs, the kind tourists usually skip because it's not as colorful as Old Faithful, when I noticed something was off. The snow around. The spring was melted in a weird pattern, not the usual circular shape you get from the heat, but long, stretched-out patches, like something big had been walking there. That's when I saw it, the footprint. At first I thought maybe it was where someone had fallen or dropped something. But no, this was clearly a foot shape, pressed deep into the snow. Steam was still rising from it, like whatever made it was as hot as the springs themselves. I've seen all kinds of tracks in my time here. Elk, moose, bears, you name it. This was different. The print was huge, easily twice the size of my boot, but that wasn't the weird part. The weird part was how the snow around it wasn't just melted, it was almost cooked. Like something blazing hot had stepped there. I took out my phone to take a picture, but my hands were shaking so bad. The first few shots came out blurry. Finally got a clear one, though looking at it now, the photo doesn't really show how strange it was in person, how wrong it felt. The radio on my belt crackled, making me jump. "Marcus, you copy?" It was Jenny from the main office. "Got some visitors, reporting strange noises near the west entrance. Can you check it out?" I keyed the radio. "Yeah, I copy. On my way." I took one last look at the footprint. Something in my gut told me this was just the beginning. 20 years of ranger work teaches you to trust your gut. As I headed toward my truck, the steam vents seemed to hiss a little louder than usual, and for the first time since I started this job, the familiar sounds of Yellowstone in winter didn't feel comforting anymore. They felt like warnings. I should have listened harder to those warnings, should have called in backup right then. But how could I have known what was coming? How could anyone have guessed what was really living in the steam and heat beneath Yellowstone's frozen surface? Sometimes I wonder if sharing this story is a mistake. But people need to know. They need to understand that there are things out there, ancient things that we never learned about in ranger training. Things that have been here long before us, and will probably be here long after we're gone. This is my story. Every word of it is true, even the parts I wish weren't. The drive to the west entrance usually takes 20 minutes. That day, it felt longer. I couldn't stop thinking about that footprint, and my hands kept squeezing the steering wheel too tight. The visitors who reported the strange noises were a family of 4, mom, dad, and 2 kids who looked about 12. They were standing by their car, all bundled up in winter coats, looking nervous. It was like a deep rumbling, the father said, rubbing his hands together to keep warm. At first, we thought it was just another geyser, but then we heard the scream, his wife cut in. Not like an animal scream, more like steam escaping, but wrong somehow. I nodded, trying to look calm even though my stomach was doing flips, and that description, it matched something I'd heard last week but hadn't reported. Who would believe me? Did you see anything? I asked, pulling out my notebook. Act normal, I told myself. This is just another day at work. The younger kid, a girl with a pink hat, tugged at my jacket. I saw steam moving funny, she whispered, like it was following something big. Kids notice things adults miss sometimes. I wrote down her words carefully. After taking their contact details and assuring them we'd investigate, I started searching the area. The ground here was different from my usual patrol route. More open, fewer trees. Perfect for spotting tracks. And there they were. 3 more footprints, just like the one I'd found earlier. They made a line heading toward the thick forest, where the steam vents were more active. Each print was deep in the snow, and even though they looked hours old, they were still letting off wisps of steam. I followed the tracks, keeping my radio ready. The smart thing would have been to call for backup, but something told me I needed to see this for myself first. The trees got thicker, and the steam from the vents made it hard to see more than 20 feet ahead. That's when I heard it. That sound, the family described, like a giant kettle about to boil over, but with something else mixed in. Something almost like words. My flashlight beam caught movement ahead. Something big shifted in the steam. Not a bear. Bears don't walk upright like that. Not a moose either. This was different. Through a gap in the steam, I saw it. Just for a second, but that was enough. A massive shape, at least 8 feet tall. Its skin looking like old bark mixed with rock. Steam was rolling off its body like it was made of the hot springs themselves. Its eyes, I only caught a glimpse, but they glowed like the sunrise hitting morning frost. Then it was gone, melting into the steam like it was never there. But the ground where it had stood was completely clear of snow, melted in a perfect circle. My radio crackled again, making me nearly jump out of my skin. Marcus, Jenny again. Everything okay out there? I stared at the melted circle, my hands shaking as I picked up the radio. What could I possibly say? Hey, Jenny, I just saw something that looks like a cross between a hot spring and Bigfoot. Yeah, that would go over well. Yeah, I managed to say. All clear here. Just some unusual thermal activity. I'm going to stick around and monitor it. Copy that. Be careful out there. Weather report says we might get heavy snow later. I clicked off the radio and took out my phone, snapping pictures of the tracks and the melted circle. Evidence. I needed evidence, because I knew right then that this was just the beginning, and no one was going to believe me without proof. The steam vents hissed around me, and somewhere in the distance, I heard that rumbling sound again. Closer this time. Whatever this thing was, it wasn't just passing through, it was hunting. Back in my office that evening, I couldn't stop looking at the photos on my phone. They didn't show much, just those weird footprints in the melted circle. But they proved I wasn't going crazy. Something was out there. I've got this old friend, Joe 2 Rivers, who's worked in the park even longer than me. His grandfather used to tell stories about Yellowstone passed down through their tribe. I decided to give him a call. Hey, Joe, got a minute? I need to ask you about something unusual. There was a pause on the other end. This about the steamwalker? My heart skipped a beat. The what? My grandfather used to warn us about it. Said it was here long before the park, long before any people. Said it lived in the hot places underground and only came up when the earth was angry. Joe's voice got quiet. You've seen it, haven't you? I told him everything. The footprints, the family story, what I saw in the steam. He listened without interrupting. "There's something else you should know," he said when I finished. "Check the missing persons records for winter months. Going. Check as far as you can." I spent the next hour digging through old files on my computer. What I found made my blood run cold. Every 10 years, like clockwork, people would go missing in the park. Always in winter, always near the hot springs. The reports would say they probably fell in or got lost in the snow, but their bodies were never found. The last disappearances were in 2014, which meant, "We're due," I whispered to myself. I printed out the old reports and spread them on my desk. Most were tourists, but some were park workers too. One report from 1994 caught my eye. A ranger had written about finding strange tracks in the snow, like something too hot to be alive had walked there. The ranger who wrote that report disappeared 3 days later. My office suddenly felt too small, too dark. Outside my window, snow was starting to fall, thick and fast. The weather report was right. We were in for a big storm. My phone buzzed. A text from Jenny. "Highways closing due to weather. All visitors evacuated. Just you, me, and Mike on night shift. Just 3 of us in this whole section of the park. Perfect timing for something that liked to hunt in winter." I was about to text back when my office lights flickered. Then they went out completely. The backup generator kicked in after a few seconds, but those moments of darkness felt way too long. That's when I heard it. That deep rumbling sound again. But this time it was coming from underneath my office. The coffee cup on my desk started trembling like in that old dinosaur movie. My radio crackled. "Marcus?" It was Mike. His voice sounded shaky. "You need to see this. I'm at Old Faithful and it's wrong. The geyser's steam. It's moving against the wind and there's something in it, something big." I grabbed my gear, flashlight, extra batteries, flares, first aid kit. Stopped to think, then grabbed the old bear rifle from the wall too. I didn't know if bullets would work on something that lived in boiling water, but it felt better than having nothing. As I headed for my truck, I remembered what Joe said about the steam walker only coming up when the earth was angry. The past week, our sensors had been picking up unusual activity underground. More pressure than normal, higher temperatures in the hot springs. The earth was definitely angry about something, and now we were alone in the park with whatever that anger had. Woken up. The drive to Old Faithful was like something from a nightmare. Snow was falling so thick, I could barely see past my headlights. The only good thing about the weather was that all the visitors were gone. Nobody else would be in danger tonight. Kept my radio on, listening for Mike or Jenny. All I got was static and that weird rumbling sound getting stronger as I got closer to Old Faithful. Then I saw it. Old Faithful, the famous geyser that shoots water up like a giant fountain every 90 minutes or so. Except it wasn't shooting up anymore. The steam was spreading out like a blanket, covering everything. And Mike was right. It was moving in the wrong direction, swirling against the wind like it had a mind of its own. "Mike?" I called out, grabbing my flashlight and rifle. No answer. I found his truck parked near the visitor center, driver's door open, engine still running. His footprints led toward Old Faithful, then disappeared where the steam met the ground. The smell of sulfur was overwhelming now, making my eyes water. The steam was so thick I could barely see 10 feet ahead. My flashlight beam just bounced back at me like trying to shine a light through milk. That's when I heard Mike scream. I ran toward the sound, my boots crunching in the snow. The steam parted for a second, and I saw him. Mike was backing away from something huge, something that looked like it was made of rock and steam and darkness. The creature, the steam walker, was even bigger up close. Its skin looked like the crusty rock around hot springs, cracked and steaming. Heat rolled off it in waves, melting the snow in a circle around its feet. Its eyes glowed orange, like looking into the heart of a fire. "Mike, run!" I shouted, raising the rifle. But Mike was frozen in place, staring up at the thing. It reached for him with hands that looked like they were made of stone and steam. I fired the rifle. The sound echoed across the empty park. The bullet hit the creature's shoulder, and for a second, I thought it worked. Then I realized I'd only chipped its rocky skin. Like shooting at a boulder, the steam walker turned its burning eyes on me. It made that horrible rumbling sound, but this time I could almost make out words in it, like rocks grinding together to form speech. That's when I remembered something Joe had said. It comes up when the earth is angry. Maybe bullets wouldn't work, but I had another idea. I grabbed one of my emergency flares, lit it, and threw it as hard as I could. Not at the creature, but at the ground near Old Faithful's main vent. The flare hit the ground and sizzled in the snow. For a moment, nothing happened. The steam walker took a step toward me, steam pouring from the cracks in its skin. Then the ground started to shake. Old Faithful was about to erupt, right on schedule. But something was different this time. The rumbling was louder than I'd ever heard it. The steam walker stopped. Its head turned toward the geyser, and for the first time, I saw something that looked like fear in those burning eyes. "Mike!" I shouted. "Get to the visitor center. Now!" This time he moved, scrambling away from the creature. I backed up too, keeping my eyes on the steam walker. The ground shook harder. Old Faithful was building up to something big, really big. The steam walker looked caught between coming after us and running away. It took one step toward me, then stopped as the rumbling got even louder. The earth wasn't just angry anymore. It was about to explode. What happened next was like nothing I'd ever seen in my 15 years at Yellowstone. Old Faithful erupted. But this wasn't its usual straight-up fountain of water and steam. This was different. The hot water shot out at an angle straight toward the steam walker. It was like the park itself was fighting back. The creature made a sound like rocks breaking apart and tried to move away, but it was too late. The blast of scalding water hit it full force. Steam exploded everywhere, and for a few seconds I couldn't see anything at all. I heard Mike yelling from the visitor center door, "Marcus, get in here!" I ran toward his voice, the snow and steam burning my face. Behind me, the steam walker's roar turned into something else, a high-pitched whistle, like a tea kettle times 1,000. We made it inside just as all the windows rattled like they might break. The emergency lights flickered, casting weird shadows on the walls. Through the front windows, we could see Old Faithful was still going strong, way past its normal eruption time. "Jenny," I called into my radio. "Jenny, do you copy?" Her voice came through, crackling with static. "I copy. What's happening out there? The seismic monitors are going crazy." "Stay in the main office," I told her. "We'll explain everything later." Mike and I watched through the windows as Old Faithful finally started to calm down. The steam began to clear, blown away by the winter wind. Where the steam walker had been standing, there was just a circle of melted snow and a few scattered rocks that looked like they'd been through a fire. "Look," Mike pointed at the ground near the geyser. There was a new crack in the earth, steam rising from it. As we watched, the rocks that had been part of the steam walker started rolling toward the crack, like they were being pulled by a magnet. One by one, they disappeared into the crack. Then the ground sealed itself up like nothing had ever happened. "It's going home," I whispered, remembering what Joe had said about the creature living underground. We stayed in the visitor center until dawn, watching and waiting. But the steam walker didn't come back. The snow kept falling, covering up all signs of what had happened except for that one melted circle. When the sun rose, the park looked normal again, beautiful, peaceful. But now we knew its secret. Later, that day I called Joe to tell him what happened. He wasn't surprised. "The earth has its own guardians," he said. "Sometimes they come up to remind us they're still here, that this land doesn't really belong to us. We just borrow it for a while." "Will it come back?" I asked. "Maybe. In another 10 years when the earth gets restless again. But now you know what to do." He was right. Now I knew. The steam walker wasn't really a monster. It was more like a guard dog for the park. When the pressure built up underground, it came up to patrol, to warn us something big was coming. Old Faithful's super eruption had released all that pressure, sending the creature back to its underground home. These days, I still do my winter patrols, still check on the geysers and help lost tourists. But I pay more attention to the steam, down to the way it moves. And when I hear that deep rumbling sound from underground, I don't worry so much. It's just the park's guardian, making its rounds, keeping an eye on things. Some nights, when the snow is falling and the steam rises from the ground, I think I see a huge shape moving through the mist. I don't run anymore. I just nod and say, "Evening," like I would to any other park ranger. Because that's what it is, really, just another guardian of Yellowstone doing its job. Different from me, sure. But we're both here for the same reason, to protect this ancient, powerful place. And if you ever visit Yellowstone in winter, and you see steam moving against the wind, or hear a rumbling that sounds almost like words, don't be afraid. Just remember that you're walking in a place that has its own guardians. They were here long before us, and they'll be here long after we're gone. Just remember to give them space. After all, that's what any good ranger would do. Next story. Some nights when I'm alone in my cabin, I can still hear those screams echoing in my head. The ones that sounded human, but weren't. Not really. I should know. I've spent 23 years working in Mammoth Cave, and human screams don't sound like that. My name is Bill Harrison, and I need to write down what happened in those caves 3 months ago, before these urges get worse. I guess I should start at the beginning. I was, a park ranger at Mammoth Cave National Park in Kentucky. Before that, I spent 15 years as a coal miner, so you could say I know my way around dark places. My wife Mary used to joke that I was more comfortable underground than above it. She's been gone 3 years now. Cancer took her quick, but I still carry the old mining lamp she gave me on our first anniversary. Call it a good luck charm, though after what happened, I'm not sure I believe in luck anymore. The whole nightmare started on a Tuesday morning in October. The air was crisp, leaves just starting to turn when Joey, one of our junior rangers, came running into my office. His face was white as a sheet. "Bill, 3 spelunkers missing in Section K," he gasped, hands on his knees. The new section we just mapped last month. My stomach dropped. Section K was tricky, lots of tight squeezes and unexpected drops. We'd only opened it to experienced cavers, and even then, only with guides. "When did they go in?" I asked, already. Reaching for my gear, yesterday morning. They were supposed to check in last night. Rick at the visitor center just got a call from their families. I grabbed my pack, always kept it ready, and my old lamp. "Get Sarah, and meet me at the K entrance. In 15, I told him. "And Joey, bring extra batteries, lots of them." While I waited for the others, I checked my equipment one last time. 23 years of cave rescue experience had taught me to be thorough, but something felt different this time. The cave entrance seemed darker than usual, the cool air flowing out carrying a smell I'd never noticed before, like old meat left too long in the sun. That's when I saw the claw marks. They were fresh, carved deep into the limestone beside the entrance, and in the beam of my flashlight, they seemed to glow faintly, a sickly greenish color that made my skin crawl. In all my years of caving, I'd never seen anything like it. I was still staring at those marks when Tom Running Bear, one of the local tribal elders, appeared beside me. I hadn't heard him approach, which was strange in itself. The gravel path usually crunched under anyone's feet. "You shouldn't go in there, Bill," he said quietly. His eyes were fixed on the claw marks, and I noticed his hands were trembling, slightly. The hungry one has awakened. "Tom, we've got 3 people missing." He gripped my arm, his fingers surprisingly strong. "Listen to me. There are things in this world older than our oldest stories. Things that sleep in the deep places, and sometimes," he glanced at the cave entrance, "sometimes they wake up hungry." Before I could ask what he meant, I heard Joey and Sarah approaching. Tom disappeared as quietly as he'd come, leaving me, with a feeling of dread I couldn't shake. But there were lives at stake, and that had to come first. I didn't know then that I was about to face something that would make me question everything I thought I knew about the darkness underground. As we geared up, I couldn't help but notice how the entrance seemed to swallow our flashlight beams, like the darkness was somehow thicker than it should be. I gripped my old mining lamp tighter, feeling its familiar warmth against my palm. "All right," I said, trying to sound more confident than I felt. Standard search pattern. Stay within voice. Range. Radio check every 15 minutes. I paused, looking at their young faces. "And if you see anything unusual, you call it in immediately." Sarah raised an eyebrow. "Unusual like what?" I glanced at the glowing claw marks, now barely visible in the morning light. "Like anything that doesn't belong in a cave." We entered the darkness together, our footsteps echoing strangely off the limestone walls. None of us could have known that only one of us would walk back out, or what the others would become. The first hour in the cave was normal enough. We followed the main tunnel, our lights sweeping across wet limestone walls. Every now and then, water would drip from the ceiling, making quiet plinking sounds that echoed through the darkness. The air got colder as we went deeper, and I could see Joey and Sarah's breath coming out in little white clouds. "Radio check," I said into my walkie-talkie, my voice bouncing off the walls. The cave was playing tricks with sound. My words seemed to come back different, somehow wrong. "Clear," Sarah replied. "All good here," Joey's voice crackled through. We reached the first junction where the tunnel split into 3 paths. This was where things started to feel off. I'd been down these passages hundreds of times, led tours through them, even helped map them. But something was different. The air smelled wrong, like old meat and something else I couldn't place. "Look, this," Sarah called out, her light fixed on the ground. We gathered around what she'd found, a backpack. It belonged to one of the missing spelunkers, torn open like something had ripped through the thick material. Next to it lay a crushed water bottle and a handful of granola bar wrappers. "Could have been bears," Joey suggested, but his voice shook. We all knew bears didn't come this deep into the caves. I picked up the backpack, turning it over in my hands. That's when I saw the teeth marks. They were huge, bigger than any cave creature I knew of, and they'd punched clean through the reinforced bottom of the pack. "Split up," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Joey, take the left tunnel. Sarah, right, I'll go straight. Remember, radio check every 15 minutes, and if you see anything strange, we call it in." They finished together. I watched. Their lights disappear down their respective tunnels, then turned to face my own path. The darkness ahead seemed thicker than usual, like it was eating my flashlight beam. I touched my old mining lamp for luck and started walking. 10 minutes in, I found the first real sign something was wrong. Claw marks, just like the ones at the entrance, ran along the wall at about chest height. They glowed with that same sickly green color, casting weird shadows that seemed to move when I wasn't looking directly at them. As I moved my light along the wall, I noticed they led deeper into the cave. That's when I heard it, a sound that made my blood run cold. It was like someone calling for help, but wrong. The voice was familiar, but I couldn't place it. It seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. "Hello?" the voice called. "Is anyone there, please? I'm hurt." I grabbed my radio. "Joey, Sarah, anyone else hear that?" Static answered me. Just static and that voice getting closer. "Please, Bill, is that you? I need help." The voice, it sounded like Mary. My Mary, who'd been dead for 3 years. My hands started shaking. The beam of my flashlight danced across the walls, making the glowing claw marks seem to move. I backed up slowly, my heart pounding so loud I was sure whatever was down here could hear it. The radio crackled to life, making me jump. "Bill!" It was Sarah, her voice high with panic. "Bill, I found something. Oh God, there's blood everywhere. And these symbols on the wall, they're..." Her voice cut off in a scream that echoed through the entire cave system. But the echo, it turned into laughter. Deep, hungry laughter that no human throat could make. "Sarah!" I yelled into my radio. "Sarah, come in." Nothing but static. Joey, do you copy?" More static, then Joey's voice, breathless. "Bill, I can see it. It's not... Oh, Jesus, it's coming this way. It's..." His radio went dead, too. I stood there in the darkness, my light beam shaking as that thing that wasn't Mary called out. Again, closer now. Close enough that I could hear its footsteps. Close enough that I could smell its breath. The smell of old meat and something worse. and I knew with horrible certainty that I had led my team right into its hunting grounds. I had two choices: run back to the entrance or go deeper to find my team. The thing wearing Mary's voice was getting closer, its footsteps making weird scraping sounds against the stone floor. I took a deep breath and headed toward where I'd heard Sarah's scream. Running away wasn't an option, not while my people were down here. The tunnel got narrower as I went deeper. The walls pressed in close and the ceiling dipped so low I had to duck my head. My breathing sounded too loud in the tight space. Every few steps, I'd shine my light behind me, expecting to see something. But there was only darkness. Then, my radio came alive with a burst of static and whispers. I held it close to my ear, trying to make out the words. It sounded like multiple voices talking at once, some of them familiar. Sarah, Joey, the missing spelunkers. But they were saying things that made no sense, things about hunger and darkness and flesh. I clicked the radio off. The silence that followed was almost worse. The tunnel opened into a larger chamber, and that's where I found the first body. I'd seen dead people before in cave rescues gone wrong, but nothing like this. It was one of the spelunkers, or what was left of him. His body was twisted into impossible angles, like something had tried to fold him up like paper. But the worst part was his face. He died screaming, but not from the twisting. No, the teeth marks around his chest told a different story. I was so focused on the body that I almost missed the sound. A quiet clicking noise like someone tapping their fingernails on stone. It was coming from one of the smaller tunnels branching off the chamber. My light caught movement, something pale disappearing around a corner. "Sarah," I called out, keeping my voice low. "Joey." The clicking stopped. Then came a sound like joints, popping one after another like someone or something stretching. I backed away toward another tunnel, trying to move quietly. My foot hit something that rolled. A helmet. Sarah's helmet, with her light still on. The beam pointed at the wall, and what I saw there made me freeze. Symbols were carved into the rock, hundreds of them, glowing with that same green light as the claw marks. They looked ancient, but somehow wet, like they'd been carved recently. As I stared at them, they seemed to move, shifting and changing when I blinked. A rock clattered down somewhere in the darkness behind me. I spun around, light beam cutting through the air. For just a second, I caught a glimpse of something that should not exist. A tall, skeletal figure with skin so pale it was almost see-through. Its joints were bent the wrong way, and its face... I thank God every day that I didn't get a clear look at its face. It moved faster than anything I've ever seen, disappearing into another tunnel. The sound of its movement was all wrong, like it was coming from everywhere at once. "Bill," Joey's voice echoed through the chamber, but it wasn't coming from my radio. It was coming from the tunnel where I'd seen the thing. "Bill, help me. It hurts." I knew it wasn't really Joey, just like I'd known it wasn't really Mary, but knowing something and believing it are two different things when you're alone in the dark. Then I heard the real Joey scream. It came from somewhere deeper in the cave, and it was followed by sounds I'll never forget. The scraping of claws on stone, the wet tearing of something, and a horrible slurping noise. The radio on my belt suddenly burst to life. Through the static, I heard Sarah crying. Not the fake Sarah voice the thing had used before, but really her. "Bill," she sobbed, "I'm in the old mining tunnel. There's more than one of them. Please." Her voice cut off with a sharp crack, the sound of breaking bone. The thing in the tunnel made that horrible laughing sound again. Then I heard it start to move, its claws clicking against the stone as it came for me. I had seconds to decide which way to run. I chose the path that led down into the deepest part of the cave system, because that's where Sarah's real voice had come from, and because I'd seen something else in that chamber with the symbols. Something that looked like the entrance to a burial room, a very old burial room. As I ran, I heard them moving through. The tunnels around me, they were hurting me, I realized, like wolves driving prey where they wanted it to go. And I was heading exactly where they wanted me to be. But I had my old mining lamp, and I had an idea. A horrible idea, but when you're being hunted by monsters in the dark, horrible ideas are sometimes all you've got. The burial chamber was huge. My flashlight beam couldn't even reach the ceiling. Old wooden torches lined the walls, and bones, so many bones, were piled in corners. But these weren't normal burial remains. Every skull I saw had been cracked open. Every bone showed teeth marks. "Oh God," I whispered, my voice shaking. "They've been feeding here for centuries." The walls were covered in more of those glowing symbols, but different from the ones above. These told a story in pictures. I saw drawings of tall, skinny creatures, hunting people. Native Americans first, then settlers, then modern-day visitors. The cave system wasn't just their home. It was their kitchen. My radio crackled again. This time I heard Sarah's voice, but it was wrong. Like something was using her voice, but didn't quite know how to speak properly. "Bill." The voice dragged. Out my name. "So hungry, Bill. We're all so hungry down here." A scraping sound came from behind me. I spun around and saw him. Joey. But not Joey anymore. His skin had gone pale white, stretched too tight over his bones. His joints bent backward as he crawled across the ceiling like a spider. His mouth was full of long, sharp teeth. "Join us," Joey said, but his voice wasn't alone. I heard Sarah's voice in there too, and Mary's, and others I didn't recognize. The hunger feels so good. I backed away, bumping into something cold. Turning slowly, I found myself face to face with one of them, a full-grown Wendigo. It was so tall its head nearly touched the ceiling. Its skin was like cloudy glass. I could see its bones and organs through it. Its eyes were pure white, and its mouth. I still have nightmares about that mouth, but what scared me most was its intelligence. It wasn't just some hungry animal. It watched me with those white eyes, and I could see it thinking, planning. "You've led a good hunt," it said, using Mary's voice perfectly this time. "Been so long since we had someone who made it interesting." Joey thing dropped from the ceiling, landing way too quietly for something his size. They had me trapped between them. "Your friends tasted good," the big one said. "The girl especially. So much fear it makes the meat sweet." I felt something in my hand, my old mining lamp. And suddenly I remembered what Tom Running Bear had told me once, years ago, about his people's old stories. About how evil spirits couldn't touch blessed silver. The lamp was silver. Mary had it blessed by her church before giving it to me. "But you," the Wendigo continued, stepping closer. "You'll be special. You'll be like us. Just so hungry." It reached for me with hands that had too many joints. Behind me, Joey made a sound like rocks grinding together. I swung the lamp hard, smashing it into the Wendigo's face. It screamed, a horrible sound that shook dust from the ceiling, and stumbled back. Where the silver touched it, its skin burned and melted. Joey lunged at me, but he was new, still clumsy with his changed body. I ducked and he crashed into the bigger one. I ran for the tunnel, but not up, down, deeper, because I'd seen something in that burial chamber that gave me an idea, a horrible, dangerous idea. Behind me, I heard them coming. Their screams echoed through the tunnels, but now I could hear the pain in them. They were afraid of my lamp. "You can't run." The voices were angry now, inhuman. "This is our place. Our feeding ground." "Maybe," I said to myself, gripping my lamp tight. But I was a coal miner before I was a ranger, and I know what coal dust does when it catches fire. I ran deeper into the dark, the monsters right behind me. But for the first time since this nightmare began, I had a plan. A way to end this. I just hoped I'd survive long enough to finish it. The deepest tunnels were exactly what I'd hoped for. Old coal mining passages. The walls were black with coal dust that had built up over decades. In my 15 years as a miner, I'd seen what happened when this stuff caught fire. It would burn hot enough to melt rock. I could hear them coming, their claws clicking on stone. The Joey thing was talking with Sarah's voice now. "You're going the wrong way, Bill. No exits down here." "That's the point," I muttered, pulling out my emergency flares. I always carried 3. Now I just had to set my trap. The tunnel split into 4 paths ahead. Perfect. I took out my chalk and marked the walls, not for me, but for them. I knew these creatures were smart. They'd see the marks and think I was leaving a trail. I ran down each tunnel a little way, using my hands to stir up the old coal dust, getting it into the air. My lungs burned, but I kept going. Had to make sure there was enough dust. Had to make sure it would burn. The scraping sounds were getting closer. I could hear them breathing now. Wet, hungry sounds that made my skin crawl. "Found your friends," I called out, trying to keep my voice steady. "The missing spelunkers, they're still alive." A lie, but it worked. The sounds got faster, more excited. They were coming right for me. I positioned myself where the tunnels met, flares ready. My hands were shaking so bad I almost dropped them. The silver lamp was hot against my chest where I'd tucked it into my shirt. Then they came. Not just the big one and Joey, but 3 more. They moved like spiders, crawling on the walls and ceiling, their pale skin glowing in my flashlight beam. Their mouths. God, their mouths were full of rows of teeth like sharks. "Nowhere left to run," the big one said, using Mary's voice again. That made me angry. It didn't have the right to use her voice. Who said I was running? I lit the first flare and threw it down the left tunnel. The second went right, the third straight ahead. For a second, nothing happened. The Wendigos just stared at me with their white eyes, not understanding. Then the coal dust caught. The explosion started small, just a flash of red. But it spread fast, racing along the tunnels like lightning. The heat hit me like a wall. The Wendigos screamed. Real screams this time, not their fake human voices. The fire was everywhere now, eating up the coal dust in the air, turning the tunnels into rivers of flame. The creatures tried to run, but I'd trapped them at the crossroads. Everywhere they turned, there was fire. The ceiling started to crack, rocks were falling. I turned to run, but something grabbed my arm. Joey, his skin bubbling from the heat. "If we burn, you burn," he growled, his face melting like wax. I pulled out my silver lamp and smashed it into his fingers. He let go with a shriek, stumbling back into the flames. The others were burning too, their transparent skin turning black, their bodies twisting as the fire ate them up. The big one made one last grab for me. Its claws caught my left arm, ripping through flesh and muscle like paper. The pain was unreal. I fell, screaming, as the ceiling started coming down. I don't remember much after that. Just crawling through the smoke and heat, dragging my ruined arm. Rocks falling everywhere. The monsters still screaming behind me. Their voices finally sounding like what they really were, not human, never human. I followed the air. That's what they teach you in mining. Follow fresh air if you're lost. Up and up through smaller tunnels as the lower ones collapsed. My arm left a trail of blood, but I couldn't stop. Couldn't let the darkness take me. After what felt like hours, I saw light, real light from the sun. I crawled out into the afternoon, coughing up coal dust and blood. The rescue team found me there, passed out at the entrance to Section K. They never found the bodies. Not the Wendigos, not Joey, not Sarah, not the spelunkers. The cave-in sealed those lower tunnels completely. But sometimes when I press my ear to the ground near that sealed entrance, I swear I can still hear them down there. Still hungry, still waiting. The doctors saved most of my arm, but it doesn't work right anymore. The scars pull tight when it rains, and sometimes I wake up, thinking I can still feel those claws. But the worst part isn't the arm. It's not even the nightmares. It's the hunger. It started small, just feeling a little hungrier than usual. But it's getting worse. Yesterday, I caught myself looking at the mailman and thinking how tender his throat looked. The day before, I spent an hour watching kids at the playground, wondering how their young meat would taste. I've started keeping my silver lamp next to my bed. Some nights when the hunger gets really bad, I burn myself with it. The pain helps me remember who I am, what I am, but I know it's only a matter of time before the hunger wins, before I become like them. That's why I'm writing this down. As a warning, if you're reading this and you know me, If you've seen me hanging around the cave entrance looking too thin, smiling too wide, then run. Run far and run fast because I can feel myself changing. And I'm so hungry. Newspaper clipping. Kentucky Herald, October 15th, 1963. Mammoth Cave Ranger missing. Strange incidents reported. Mammoth Cave, Kauai. Local authorities are searching for William Bill Harrison, 48, a former park ranger at Mammoth Cave National Park who disappeared from his cabin 3 days ago. Harrison was one of the survivors of last year's tragic cave collapse that claimed the lives of 2 rangers and 3 spelunkers. His cabin was empty when we checked on him, said Police Chief Daniel Roberts. But something wasn't right. The walls were covered in those same weird symbols they found in the cave last year. And there were other things that I can't discuss during an ongoing investigation. Local resident Tom Running Bear, who was one of the last people to see Harrison, reports having an unsettling conversation with him 2 days before his disappearance. He wasn't himself anymore, Running Bear stated. His skin was too pale and he wouldn't look at me directly. He kept asking about the sealed cave entrance, about whether anyone had heard sounds coming from it. When I told him no, he smiled. It wasn't a human smile. Park officials have reported an increase in strange incidents around Section K, which remains sealed after last year's collapse. Visitors have reported hearing voices calling their names from behind the sealed entrance, and several hikers claim to have seen an unusually tall, thin figure watching them from the trees near the cave at dusk. We take these reports seriously, said Park Director James Morton. We've doubled security around Section K and advise all visitors to stay on marked trails and leave the park before dark. In a disturbing development, 3 hikers have gone missing in the past month. Search parties have found no traces except for strange claw marks on trees near their last known locations. The missing hikers' backpacks were recovered yesterday. Police reports indicate they were torn open from the bottom, with what appear to be teeth marks on the reinforced material. Park notice, posted at Mammoth Cave. Visitor Center, important safety notice. Section K remains strictly off limits. No hiking. Permitted after sunset report. Any unusual sounds or sightings to park rangers immediately. If you hear someone calling your name from the woods, do not respond. If you see a very tall, thin person watching you from the trees, leave the area immediately. Do not approach anyone matching the description of William Harrison. If you hear scraping sounds above you, run final journal entry, found in Bill Harrison's cabin. They were right all along. The hunger doesn't go away, it gets stronger. But I've learned something they didn't know. We don't have to stay in the caves. The woods are dark too. So many places to hide. So many people who wander off the trails. I'm not alone anymore. Some of the ones I've taken have joined me. They understand the hunger now. We're making our own family. To anyone reading this, the caves aren't the only places you need to fear now. We're spreading, growing, hunting. And if you're reading this in my cabin, you've already stayed too long. Look up. The journal ends here. The final page shows signs of fresh claw marks and what appears to be blood.